Captain Elias Marlowe was not a man easily shaken, but as his small shuttle tore through the thick clouds of an alien atmosphere, he felt the weight of fear pressing down on him. Warning lights blinked red across the console. Sparks flew from an overloaded circuit, and the engine screamed with a sound that promised nothing but failure. He tried to steady the craft, pulling hard at the controls, but the shuttle had already given up the fight. It shuddered one last time before crashing through the trees of a dense forest, tearing branches like paper, until finally it slammed against the ground with a bone-rattling impact. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hiss of steam and the crackle of small fires along the hull. Elias groaned, his vision blurry. Pain shot through his ribs, and a sharp ache in his leg told him it might be broken. He tried to push himself up, but his body refused. For the first time in years of space travel, the confident captain felt helpless and alone. His distress beacon was damaged, and the shuttle's communication system was a ruin of wires and sparks. He could only hope someone might pick up the faint emergency signal that still flickered weakly. But this was not human space. This was Vera, a remote world known to few, home to the insectoid species called the Verathi. Elias had heard whispers of them in scattered reports, a people proud, cautious, and secretive. They did not welcome outsiders, and the galaxy at large knew little about their ways. Lying on the broken floor of his shuttle, Elias wondered if he would die here before he ever saw another human face again. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. His pain made it hard to measure time. The forest outside was alive with strange sounds, chittering, clicking, the low hum of wings brushing against the air. He drifted in and out of consciousness until finally, shadows appeared at the jagged opening of the shuttle's hull. Shapes moved with careful steps, and faint clicking voices whispered in a language Elias could not understand. He blinked through the smoke and saw them. Tall figures with hardened shells that glistened in the dim light, their bodies marked with natural patterns like armor. Their eyes were wide, multifaceted, reflecting the glow of fire. They looked both alien and strangely graceful, like living sculptures. Elias tried to lift his hand in peace, but his strength failed him, and his arm dropped weakly to the floor. The Verathi stood in silence, studying the broken human. Some tilted their heads, clicking softly to each other. Elias could not understand the words, but he knew the tone. Doubt, suspicion, maybe even fear. One of them stepped closer, the air filled with the faint hum of folded wings, but another pulled them back sharply. The group argued, their sounds sharp and fast. Elias could guess the meaning. He was a stranger, a risk, a possible enemy. Why should they help him? Then from behind them, another figure approached. This one was smaller, its shell painted with softer colors, green and gold, that shimmered under the firelight. It carried tools and small containers strapped to its sides. The others quieted as it clicked a series of deliberate sounds, almost like a song. The smaller figure stepped inside the shuttle, ignoring the smoke, and knelt beside Elias. A long, slender limb reached out, holding a container that smelled faintly of herbs. The healer had arrived. Elias felt cool liquid touch his wounds and a gentle but firm pressure against his leg. He winced, but the pain began to fade slowly, replaced by a numb warmth. The healer clicked again, this time in a softer rhythm, perhaps trying to calm him. Elias could not answer in their language, but he forced a weak smile and whispered, "Thank you." His voice was hoarse, almost broken, but the healer tilted its head, as if understanding the meaning if not the words. The others outside still argued. Some wanted to leave the human, afraid of what would happen if they interfered. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and bringing trouble to their people could mean disaster. But the healer stood firm. Its gestures were sharp, determined. It reminded them of their oldest traditions, the ones that spoke of life as sacred no matter where it came from. Finally, with reluctant clicks, the others agreed. The decision was made. They would help the human, at least until he could survive on his own. Over the next days, Elias drifted between waking and sleep. Each time he opened his eyes, the healer was there. It tended to his wounds, brought him water drawn from the forest streams, and fed him soft roots and fruits he could eat without pain. Slowly, strength returned to his body, though his legs still throbbed whenever he moved. In those quiet moments, Elias tried to speak, pointing to himself and saying his name, Elias. The healer tilted its head, then tapped its chest with a limb and clicked a sound, something like Tavi. It seemed to be a name. Tavi, the healer. Though words failed them, they learned to share meaning through gestures, tones, and patience. Elias showed gratitude with small smiles, nods, and careful movements. Tavi answered with steady presence, gentle care, and a calm that reminded Elias of the best doctors back home. In the quiet of the forest, two beings from different worlds built a fragile bridge of understanding. At night, Elias would sometimes stare up at the alien stars through the broken hull, thinking of the rescue ship that might never come. He felt fear then, the kind that grew heavy in his chest. But each time Tavi returned, checking his wounds, leaving food, staying near until sleep claimed him. That small act of kindness was a light in the darkness, one Elias clung to with all his strength. Finally, after more than a week, the faint signal from his shuttle was detected. A human search craft descended through the clouds, its engines roaring across the forest. Soldiers and medics rushed into the crash site, lifting Elias carefully onto a stretcher. His relief was overwhelming, but as he looked back, he saw Tavi standing at the edge of the forest, wings folded, watching silently. Elias raised his hand in a final salute, his voice carried by the wind. "I will not forget." The medics hurried him aboard, the engines lifted him away, and soon the planet fell behind. For the Veyrathi, it was just a small moment. A stranger helped, a life saved, and then gone. But for Elias, it was more than survival. It was a promise etched into his heart. One day, somehow, he would return the kindness. Years passed and time reshaped the galaxy. The memory of Captain Elias Marlowe's crash on Vera faded from most minds, but not from his. For him, the image of the healer Tavi and the quiet kindness of the Veyrathi was never lost. It was something he carried as a hidden part of himself, a promise unspoken. Humanity, meanwhile, grew. No longer scattered colonies depending on fragile treaties. Humans became one of the rising powers of the stars. Fleets expanded, colonies spread across dozens of systems, and their influence grew in trade, science, and defense. Elias himself rose through the ranks with steady honor, earning respect from allies and rivals alike. Eventually, he was no longer Captain Marlowe of a small scout vessel. He was Admiral Marlowe, commander of one of Earth's great defense fleets. But while humanity climbed toward strength, the Veyrathi walked a harder road. Their quiet world of Vera was rich in resources, and it drew the gaze of stronger, hungrier empires. The worst of these was the Draxan Dominion, a predator empire that thrived on conquest. The Draxan saw the Veyrathi as weak, slow to defend themselves, and ripe for harvest. At first, the Veyrathi tried to resist. Their fleets, though small, fought bravely. Their soldiers, though outnumbered, stood firm in their shining carapace armor. Yet the Dominion was relentless. One by one, Veyrathi outposts fell. Their colonies were taken, their skies burned, and their children cried out under the shadow of warships that blotted out the stars. The galaxy, watching from afar, did little. Some pitied them, but none moved to help. Others whispered that the Veyrathi were always too reclusive, too proud to build strong allies. And so the messages of distress that the Veyrathi sent out across the void faded unanswered, like sparks dying in a cold wind. Still, they sent them. Every channel, every beacon, every chance. Desperate calls went out. "We are under attack. We need aid. We cannot stand alone." But silence answered. Silence and the crushing advance of the Draxan. On Vera itself, the healer Tavi, now older, walked the same forest paths where once a broken human had lain among the trees. Tavi remembered his name, Elias, and remembered the strange way he had smiled even in pain, the way he had raised his hand in farewell. But those days felt far away now, like a dream. Tavi tended to the wounded just as always, but each day the patients grew more numerous, the wounds more terrible. For the first time, even Tavi felt despair. Then, among the many signals sent out, one was crafted differently. It was not directed at the galaxy at large, but to one man. Somewhere deep in the archives, the Veyrathi had stored the identification of the human they once helped, hoping one day to send a message. It was a fragile hope, a whisper sent to the stars. "To Elias Marlowe, if you yet live. Once you were cared for on Vera. Now we ask, though we do not deserve, will humanity hear us?" The message traveled across the void. Weeks passed. The Veyrathi prepared for the end, convinced it was too late. But far away, in the command center of a massive human flagship, a signal reached Admiral Elias Marlowe. At first, it was just one of many transmissions, a faint echo among thousands. Then the name appeared on the screen. Vera. Elias froze. The room around him faded as memory surged. The crash, the forest, the healer's quiet presence. He read the words slowly, his eyes burning with emotion he had not felt in years. They had remembered him, and now they called for help. His officers saw the look on his face and waited. Elias rose from his chair, his voice firm. "Signal the fleet. Prepare for immediate redeployment. Set our course for Vera." One officer hesitated. "Admiral, the Draxan Dominion knows only conquest," Elias finished. "But we know something they do not. Humanity remembers." The words spread through the command deck, carried by the calm certainty of their leader. The fleet, hundreds of ships strong, shifted course. Messages were sent across the human alliance networks. Elias did not simply summon his own force. He called upon others, captains and admirals who owed him favors, allies who trusted his judgment, and young commanders eager to prove themselves. Ships began to rally. Humanity had heard the call. Back on Vera, the Verathi prepared for the final defense. Their skies were darkened by the Draxan fleet, massive carriers and warships descending like vultures. In the forests, families huddled together, and soldiers braced themselves for a hopeless fight. Tavi worked without rest, tending to the injured, whispering quiet prayers in the Verathi tongue. The people expected no rescue. They had been abandoned too many times before. Then, just as the Dominion prepared its last assault, the stars shifted. New signals appeared on the edge of the system. Sensors screamed warnings. The Draxan commanders expected reinforcements of their own. But then the transmissions became clear. They were human. Dozens of ships at first, then hundreds. An entire fleet arriving in force, their engines burning bright against the void. The Verathi stared upward in disbelief. They had asked for help with no hope of answer. And yet here across the endless stars came humanity, banners of Earth gleaming, weapons armed, and a single voice echoing across the comms. "This is Admiral Elias Marlowe of the Terran Defense Fleet. To the Draxan Dominion, leave this world. To the Verathi, you are not alone." For the first time in many years, hope rose in Vera's hearts. The healer Tavi, standing on the cliffs above the forest, felt tears sting in wide, faceted eyes. Against all expectation, the human had remembered. And not just one human, an entire fleet. The skies above Vera trembled as the fleets faced each other. On one side, the Draxan Dominion, their warships heavy with weapons and arrogance, prepared to strike the final blow against what they thought was a weak and broken race. On the other, a wall of steel and firepower now formed as the human fleet emerged from the void, hundreds of ships taking position in disciplined lines. The banners of Earth glowed bright across their hulls, declaring to the galaxy that humanity had come. Admiral Elias Marlowe stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Resolute Dawn. Around him, officers moved quickly, relaying orders, adjusting shields, preparing weapons. Yet for a moment, Elias was silent, his eyes fixed on the planet below. He could almost see the forests where he had once lain broken, tended by gentle alien hands. He whispered softly, though none around him heard, "I told you I would not forget." The Draxan fleet moved first, their commanders unwilling to believe humanity's presence was more than a bluff. Cruisers advanced in thick formations, heavy cannons glowing as they charged. On the ground, Verathi eyes widened as the skies filled with deadly light. But then the humans answered. "Form defensive wall," Elias commanded calmly. "Destroyers in front, carriers behind. Fighters, prepare for launch." At once, the Resolute Dawn's massive engines burned bright, leading the line. Human destroyers spread their shields, forming a barrier against the incoming fire. Carriers opened their hangar bays, releasing swarms of sleek fighters that darted like sparks across the void. The first Draxan barrage struck, but the shields held, and the human line did not break. Then came the counterstrike. Human dreadnoughts unleashed their weapons in perfect rhythm, volleys of plasma fire tearing through the Draxan vanguard. Fighters darted between enemy cruisers, striking engines and turrets with precise shots. Explosions lit the void like falling stars. For the Verathi watching below, it was overwhelming. They had never seen such unity. Such strength brought not for conquest but for protection. The humans did not come to rule them, nor to take their resources. They came because once, long ago, a healer had shown kindness to a stranger. And humanity remembered. The battle raged on. The Draxan, furious, threw more ships into the fight. Their commanders roared orders, demanding the humans retreat, but the human fleet only pressed forward, each ship moving with the discipline of years of training, each captain fighting with the same purpose, to defend those who had once defended one of their own. On the ground, Tavi stood on a cliff overlooking the capital city. The healer's faceted eyes reflected the streaks of fire above, the clash of fleets. Around Tavi, Verathi soldiers and civilians watched in awe. Many wept quietly, their voices clicking prayers of thanks. They had thought themselves forgotten. Yet here was proof that even in a vast, cold galaxy, memory and honor still mattered. Inside the resolute dawn, the battle turned fierce. The Draxan flagship pushed into the human line, its weapons blazing. Shields flickered under the heavy assault, and several human cruisers took direct hits, their hulls breaking apart. But Elias stood firm. "Bring the fleet together," he ordered. "Tighten the circle. Protect each other." His voice carried calm strength, and the fleet obeyed. Ship after ship locked into formation, covering one another, their firepower combined. The Draxan flagship suddenly found itself under concentrated fire. Human dreadnoughts struck from every side, and fighters swarmed like hornets, stabbing into its engines. At last, with a thunderous explosion, the massive warship cracked apart, flames spilling into the void. The sight broke the Dominion's confidence. Their formations faltered, their commanders hesitated, and then came the final command from Elias. "Advance. Drive them from this system." The human fleet surged forward, pressing the advantage. One by one, the Draxan ships fell back, then fled entirely. Their once unstoppable force shattered. The skies cleared, and silence returned to orbit around Vera. The humans had won. Cheers erupted across the human ships. Relief swept the Verathi cities below. The people who had prepared for destruction now lifted their heads in hope. Elias stood at the center of the bridge, his expression steady but his heart full. He gave only one final order. "Signal the Verathi. Tell them they are safe." Moments later, on the planet, a transmission echoed through the capital. The voice of Admiral Elias Marlowe, calm and clear, filled every hall and every home. "To the Verathi people," he said, "you are not forgotten. Once one of your own showed kindness to a human when no one else would. Humanity remembers, and when we answer, we do not answer alone. We answer together." In the forests, Tavi fell to their knees, wings trembling with emotion. Though the healer could not understand every human word, the meaning was clear. Elias had returned, and not only him, an entire fleet had come because of that one moment so long ago. From that day forward, the Verathi were no longer alone. Humanity stood beside them, not as rulers but as allies, bound by memory and gratitude. The galaxy looked on in shock, realizing that to harm one human or to show kindness to one was never a small thing, for humanity always remembered. And for the Verathi, what had once been a quiet act in a forest became the seed of their survival. The kindness of one healer had brought salvation to an entire people. The skies above Vera cleared, but the memory of the fleet that answered the call would never fade.